I need your strength and wisdom, O God. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may know the things you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. Amen. So in case you, how many of you have, I don't presume that everybody has read any part of this book. So let's just get that out there. But if you don't have it, and I believe all the copies sold out in the bookstore, and so you can probably get a copy online if you would like it. I will say that it's one of the books that I'm glad that I have the paper copy, not only for this class, but also because I like to write and star in books to show what is important to me. So as a means of agenda for the class, what we can expect to cover today, I'm just going to go through chapter 2. And next week we'll go chapters 3, that means 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the bulk of it is next week. The reason why we're going to have 4 weeks, but now we just have 3. So we're just going through chapter 2 this time. We'll do the middle portion next week, and then we'll conclude on the 30th. So that way we still keep it in July, which was our intent. Still thankful we got to celebrate Kathy last week, so I have no regrets about the modified format. But that's just to give you, in case you are reading the book and want to follow along. And then, how many of you have either seen or heard or read Bishop Stephen Charleston before? Some of you have. He was a Tippy McMichael lecture speaker at least once, if not twice. I think he was one of the first Tippy speakers and priests that I heard when he would say, my Christians, my friends, my brothers and sisters, listen. He would talk directly to us in a very familial way, and which, if you think about Native tradition, being kin is really important. So being part of the family is just kind of a given as children of creation. So this is a relatively recent picture of Stephen Charleston, and he has a very popular Facebook page, in which is important to this book because the meditations that are in italics throughout the book are from his meditations. So the book itself is a format of the meditations from Facebook and commentary on this present darkness in our journey of transformation, what he calls the ladder to the light. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But so his prayer practice is in the morning to go for his walk and to listen and kind of commune with, pay attention to the 4 directions, pray in the 4 directions, and then listen to what the Spirit is inspiring him with. And then he comes away with these prayerful meditations or reflections that he shares on Facebook. And I believe he said, you can only have 10,000 or 15 or 25,000 followers. He had to open a second Facebook page because he exceeded. And he also said that when he first started writing, he was self-publishing and do it on his own because he couldn't get a publisher to carry his books. He said, but once he amassed this Facebook following and had thousands of followers, for some reason, publishers were suddenly interested to talk to him. So he actually just had another book come out. I can see the cover of it, but it's more meditations. If you notice when this book was published in 2021, so this was kind of a pandemic project for him. He probably had started on it before the pandemic, but certainly it came out in a time when we really needed to hear a word of hope and light. He talks about what he feels like is the present darkness of our time. Just a sense of, I don't know, what do you think are some signs of, and not some things that tend to pull you towards despair. How about we call darkness that? What are some things right now that pull you towards despair? Jim?
What troubles me is neglect of others, and turning away from things that are harmful to others.
Others have suggestions? Susie?
I worry about the changing climate, our Mother Earth.
He shares a story like in the very beginning. I'm looking at where he's talking about, I think he starts on page 3, when he was standing at a parish hall in New England. And he says, speaking to an audience of largely professional people with comfortable incomes, well-educated, well-read, and alert to the news of the day by all of society's measuring sticks, they should have been among the best and brightest and most optimistic, the bedrock of an enlightened spiritual community. They should have been confident, but they were not. In fact, they were just the opposite. They were worried. And he said he asked them to name one institution. He said the depth and nature of their worry was revealed in how they responded when I asked them to name one institution, one public system in our culture in which they still had complete confidence. Political system, judicial system, healthcare system, religious institution? None. They didn't have confidence in any of those systems or institutions. And so he said that he doesn't believe that the people in New England are alone in their doubts. Any reasonable look at American culture today would verify a pervasive unease about the path our society is taking. He says it doesn't matter whether we label ourselves conservative or progressive, the reality we share means many of us are losing confidence. We are worried. The ground seems to be shifting beneath our feet. We no longer rely on the institutions we once felt were our firm foundation. We are afraid, and we are looking for a way out of the darkness and into light. So that's pretty much the premise of this book. So the ladder to the light comes from this image that he uses of a kiva. Have any of you traveled to like the Southwest or anywhere in? Oh, so some of you have. Fantastic. I haven't, so I'm delighted to. If you had pictures, you wouldn't have to look at online for some images from Google. But so kiva is a Hopi word, a metaphor for our contemporary spiritual situation, which he labels the crisis of confidence. And so you can see, like, the kiva is traditionally a round room, as from what I understand. So you all can correct me if I am misunderstanding, incorrect, if I am misunderstanding. So the kiva points down toward the earth, and the darkness of it is womb-like. So this, what I thought, and I should have put like tabs in my book, but when he talks about the darkness of a kiva, it's like, it's not a negative connotation for darkness is good. We need the sun to be away for a while so that we can fully rest. And so like the womb-like nature of a kiva is like that nurturing darkness. If you think about like, compost in the earth, like things have to break down, things have to germinate, and seeds need the darkness for the roots to break forth out of the seed. And so this is a generative darkness. He said, and it points down towards the earth, which if we think about, like the earth is our ground, like the ground of our being. The earth is where the trees put their roots in, and so it is a firm foundation, right? And so he said we need to look down toward the earth instead of always looking beyond ourselves or like out in our present reality trying to find the answers, when we sometimes need to go in to connect either to the earth or connect inwardly to ourselves. So that's how I'm kind of reading it and listening to it. Does anybody else have any different understanding or just another perspective that you would like to share? Yeah. So Matthew said the gospel today in Matthew is Jesus giving the parable of the sower, right? And so the sower scatters the seeds with abandon, and it falls on, on the path, and it doesn't have any room, the depth of soil, and so the seeds get picked up by the birds, or there's too many rocks and not enough soil, or there's too many thorns around and it's crowding out the seed so the seed can't grow, or there is good fertile earth. And it's that if you think about, I love to talk about, I'm doing this because I like to dig in the dirt, right? So if you think about like double digging and getting all the rocks out, and so like the earth goes down a little bit, but it's good. It's just brown and it's loamy, and you've got your compost in it that you need to mix in, and you're ready to just easily just drag your finger along and drop the little seeds, cover them back up, and just water it. And it's like God's grace that they grow. Like, you can't make them grow. I wish it were like, how many of you have seen that movie? Is it Spirited? No, it's My Neighbor Totoro. Yeah, and they do like a dance. So they plant some seeds and they go out at night and do like this dance around there, and they watch this huge tree grow. I was like, I wish it were like that. But that's kind of like if we imagine, if God were just dancing around the seeds that we have and encouraging to grow. That's like just a visual of God's grace. So soil is good, fertile soil is good, but there are a lot of conditions that make it not great, and those are things that we usually let accumulate or build up around. So this book is modeled to be a kiva in some sense, to take us inward, to take us deep, and to think about what tools or what steps we can take along the spiritual journey to emerge with hope. And he says that Native Americans have lived through darkness and survived. So like Native Americans are particularly suited to talk about surviving the apocalypse because their world has ended in a sense. Now, full disclosure, I have Native American background. I'm a Cherokee citizen and citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And so the Native imagery and the Native spirituality is like in my bones and DNA in ways that I'm not aware of. So I can read or hear something that will touch me very deeply, and it's because I'm not as self-aware. Because my grandmother did not want to teach my mother any of the cultural ways of the Cherokee, because my grandmother was at an Indian boarding school. So she did not do any of that and raise my mother as Western as she could, even though my mother does not look like a white American. And so that was not her experience, even though that's what she was raised. So I've talked to Stephen Charleston a little bit about just the ways I think about theology and about God, and there's a lot of similarities. So, and actually, I think he has another book in the works that's about Native Americans surviving their apocalypse and the hope that they have to share with the world. So that's kind of one of those germinating ideas that I look forward to hearing more about from him. Anything else about the kiva that you noted in your own reading or have questions about? Yeah.
The sun moves across the floor, and when you start to notice its movement, it's kind of slow, and it slows you down to watch it.
Yeah. And I have this link to the video. I'm not going to click on it, but if I share the links, you're welcome to click on it. PBS has a Facebook video that's like maybe 10 seconds long that just says, I think that what the kiva is used for is, prayerful, sacred rituals, particularly for healing, for rain, for, there's one other thing that I can't remember exactly, but so they are purposeful, intentional, sacred rooms.
I just love the idea of Mother Earth being kind of a foundation for a lot of indigenous religions and beliefs. And the kiva, to me, is getting down into that, just completely immersed and feeling the interconnectedness of everything.
My counselor, because I think everybody should have a therapist or a counselor, right? I have one too. James, Julie in the back has some. She encouraged me to take off my shoes and just like walk barefoot outside every once in a while. She's like, Sarah, you've just got to be connected and just feel the earth beneath your feet every once in a while. She's like, so if you've been like inside too much or just been, like pounding the pavement too much, she's like, just go out, take your shoes off, go outside and just be, either sit in the ground or just walk around the yard, whatever you need to do, but just to be connected in that way. Yeah, Julie.
What strikes me about the kiva, in addition to being a separate space, is also that you are allowed to take the time. In our culture, we barely acknowledge that people need healing, and we certainly don't expect them to take time away, especially for emotional healing.
Yeah.
So I think that's really wonderful.
So if we take the time to notice that the sun takes time, like there's nothing that marks the time for us like the sun. and it moves at a set pace. We can't speed it up and we can't slow it down, no matter how much we try to fit into our calendars at the same time. Right? We can't change that pace of time, and if we actually slow down to the rhythms of nature, I think our pace and our heart rates and everything would slow down accordingly. So here's the basic format, and the chapters are set up for the 8 rungs of the ladder, and they're on page 7 to 8 in the book. Matthew? Uh-huh. So the question is from online, can anyone go into the kiva, or do you have to be invited? And the truth is, I don't know particularly, but those of you who have been to sites, what is the policy? I'm sure like if you were on a reservation where they have kivas that are actually used for sacred purposes, there would need to be an invitation, but there are some that are like historical sites that you can tour and visit. Is that so? Like a national park kind of way you can go in.
I think that's where I've had the opportunity to go to a kiva. It was a national park.
And there were other nods from others, so thanks for the question. Okay, we ready for the rungs? And I noticed that the picture of the ladder, I was like counting. There were 8 rungs that I could see on the ladder. So this is I don't know if there's always 8 rungs on the ladder, but here's the ones that Stephen Charleston names for us. The first rung of the ladder, starting at the bottom, is one of faith and trust in what we can't see. The second one is blessing, the rung of blessing, and that has to do with the intimacy of with spirit, and we'll talk about both of those today. The third one is hope, the dream of the soul. The fourth one is community, and community that sustains us. The fifth one is action, and action confronting what pulls on us, what pulls us down. Sixth is truth and honesty of the journey. And seventh rung of renewal, being able to see clearly through hope. And the 8th rung is transformation and emerging into the light. And that emerging into the light, for me, I was trying to kind of wrestle with that emerging into the light. Like the light of the kiva comes from the sun. It's like coming from above the ground. And like that's what to me, like you're coming out and you emerge in the light. But there's also like outside of the kiva is also where the reality is, and the reality of all those systems and institutions that we don't have confidence in, and all the things that tempt and try us and make life difficult for us and keep us from being able to see, the hope that we have or connect with the spirit that we long to be in connection with. So there's kind of that being able to emerge into the light and hold on to that, the true light of our Creator, while not being drowned by just the overstimulation of reality. That's one of the things that I kind of anything that when you're thinking about this whole metaphor, anything that's you're kind of like wrestling with? Because we don't always have to agree with everything that we read. It's good to think about it and see if there's anything that kind of, don't know what I think about that.
I think this goes along with what you're saying. So at 8, we're emerging into the light, but the first rung is we trust what we can't see, and you're in the bottom of the kiva where it's dark, and you take those moments to just sit and have faith that it's okay that we're down here in the dark.
Yeah. And the Barbara Brown Taylor's book, I'm totally blanking on the name of it right now. So you're not, but book about darkness, learning to walk in the dark. That's it. Thank you. Learning to walk in the dark from Barbara Brown Taylor. She talks about like going into a cave, and really like it's a great book for Advent when the days are short and the nights are long, and thinking about what we learn in the darkness. And so learning to walk in the dark is like learning to navigate through those long nights of the soul, or those times when we have a hard time seeing light and hope in our lives. All right, so that's the ladder. If we were to label each of the rungs, that's what you got. So the meditations that he offers that are in italics through the book, there's this one from page 11. Would somebody like to read it with the microphone? We have a taker.
An offering of peace. I have achieved few things in my life worth noting, but one thing I have achieved is important, not because of what it reflects about me, but because of what it may offer to you. I am a person at peace within myself, at peace with the world around me. All my other faults are intact and fully apparent, but deep in my spirit's core, I am a calm soul. What does that mean? According to the ancient tradition, it means I have something I can share. The peace I feel is not something I am to keep, but give away. So please receive the one true thing of value I can give, this offering of peace for your life.
Thank you. So I hope that if you think about like your own life, that you've had a moment where you feel like you have experienced or tapped into that peace that passes understanding, or just experienced that calm in the midst of a storm, calm in the midst of chaos. We talk about today in the sermon. And, I think of, Jesus saying, peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. This is Stephen Charleston's words in sharing that he has experienced that peace, and he's sharing his wisdom. He's not a very self-aggrandizing person. He's very humble, but he's offering these things because obviously they resonate with a lot of people. And if he has something of peace and some word of hope that can help us in these trying times, he's saying, here it is. See, take this. If it works, great. If it's not your cup of tea, don't buy the book. So, but I thought that this was a beautiful way of thinking, but also an invitation for you to think about what in your life, when have you had those experiences of peace? I know that if you have one that you would like to share, you are certainly invited to.
I don't want to go too off topic, but
Sure.
what this made me think of, and to relate back to what he was saying about how people lack confidence, is that it's hard, and I struggle with it all the time, but to see where something can be improved and you have the goal of making it better, so you view where you're currently at as a deficit without recognizing how far you've come or the things you've had to deal with up to that point. So I think being at peace is more understanding where you're at is where you're supposed to be at, and not being too hard on yourself or any institution or any place else, because it's not where you hope it to be at.
Yeah, beautifully said. Which makes me think about that's the benefit of transformational thinking. A transformation implies change, and when we change and grow, it's non-linear, really, because we can always regress or circle back. I think it's just all over the place. If we think about our journey in faith or our spiritual lives or our spiritual maturity, some days we may feel like we're right up there with the Dalai Lama, or right alongside the Dalai Lama, and our sense of peace and yeah, man, this is good, and everybody is good, and we're all happy, we got this. And some days we're maybe alongside the adversary, and we're burn it all, but or anywhere in between. We're not always just, I'm going to do this and then this and then this. I'm going to start at faith, and I'm going to step up, and then I'm going to be in the light, and I'm never going to go back to any of those other steps because check, I've done that. It's not like that, right? So what you're saying, it's being self-aware of where we are at any given point in time, and some days are going to be better per se than others, but it's really the only value is how close we feel in that moment to, I would say, in our union with God, our alignment with God's will. That would be, kind of our check on how well we're doing if we want to quantify it. But most of the times, it's quality, not quantity, when it comes to that. So thank you for that point. Anything else? So now chapter 1, as we're moving along. Oh, I knew I would do that. Can you give me a napkin? This is why you don't have open containers with laptops. It's not dripping down this? Yeah, it is. Pay no attention to the spilled coffee on the podium. Sorry, Dan. It didn't get on my computer, and I hope there's no electronics inside. This is where we walk in faith and carry napkins. Thank you all. So, chapter 1. We are not made for non-lidded cups. We are not made for resignation, but for freedom. And it's hope that drives us. I'm just kind of reading these points, and you can think about, thank you so much. It was just a little bit. So, but I'll clean it up. Thank you. Kiva, or the underground, it is not a bomb shelter or denial or escape. I thought that was a great thing because, I mean, like, how many of us wouldn't love to just go on retreat and just stay there? And I'm projecting, of course. Like, that sounds like a wonderful time to me. Like, let me go into this prayerful experience and be surrounded by my spiritual teachers and just, pretend like the world around me is not chaos. But this isn't what this is about, because if we truly want the transformation, we have to acknowledge where we are and acknowledge that we are a wounded, broken people. And I love how he says, like, we need common sense here. Let me see if he says something in particular. It's on page 18, if you have your book. She's talking about the earth itself, talking about Mother Earth. Cannot give more when it is all taken. There will be none left, not even for the few. The light towards which we climb is a light of common sense. I think that common sense demands not only our reason and our ability to be in relationship with one another, but also to be open and honest and self-aware and aware of our surroundings. Faith is perception. We see because we believe, as he says on page 20. It reminds me of when we're talking about liturgics. Praying shapes believing, or believing shapes our praying. It's kind of like chicken and egg, which one comes first? But truly, what you see, what you find what you seek, and so you kind of see what you believe in. If I believe in unicorns, and I happen to see a horse in the distance that's standing at just the right tree with, like, where a branch is, like, coming out of its head, I'm going to see a unicorn off in the distance, right? And you won't tell me otherwise, because that's what I believe. But if I don't believe in unicorns, I'm like, well, it's a horse standing in front of a tree. Can't you tell? But faith is how we view the world around us. Because we are Christians and believe in Jesus Christ, we see the light of Christ in others. That's my ultimate hope. That's what keeps me from falling into despair, that I believe in the presence of Christ in us all. But that faith is a step of trust, developing spiritual vision, determination, and trust in spirit. And with belief and trust, we can make a difference. Does that resonate with you? Yeah? He says, faith that is seen by believing gives us the ability to do far more than we ever imagined. We often sell ourselves short. We think we are not great leaders, that we have no special gifts, that we're too small to make much of an impact against such serious obstacles. But the more we trust in the Spirit, the more we trust in ourselves, faith gives us both the energy and the ability we need to believe in the possibility of change. It teaches us that we can make a difference. Any of y'all thinking about Gandhi right now? Like, be the change you wish to see in the world? Right? Or Mother Teresa. I had like a sign in our house at one point that says, do small things with great love, or something like that. Like the small things that we can do that can affect change. I'm glad that resonates with y'all, because it does with me too. I like how he gives us kind of like this way to practice our faith daily, to kind of nurture. If we're going to believe in these things and practice it, then we got to keep it going. And it starts on page 25. He says, here are 3 examples from the messages I received from the Spirit. 3 small steps we can take on the rung of faith: to create memories, give generously, and laugh along the way. So I think I've probably mentioned to y'all that when I take my kids hiking or we're doing something ridiculous and the kids are complaining, I'm like, we're making memories. But so he says, create memories, smile, be appreciated, be loved, and love generally. Like, make those worthy memories. And even if they're memories of, like, man, that was a really hard time, your memory from that could be you're overcoming that obstacle or you're living through that trying time. Give generously. He falls back on the principle that you give and it multiplies, especially when it's love and compassion and kindness. So, when our kids were little, we had, not 2 pennies to rub together, but I had time. And so I gave it generously. And I was greatly, I don't know, my husband's like, you don't do anything for non-selfish reasons. I was like, well, it makes me feel really good. And if that's the reward from it, I'll take it. But we give, and we receive back. But I think that pulling from that economy, like that divine economy, that there's energy and resources and enough for us to live. And we got to keep it moving, though. We don't want it to be stagnant or hoarded. And then and laugh along the way to keep balance and perspective, right? And I don't know why, but he thinks that platypuses and camels are hilarious. I was like, why does he think that platypuses and camels are funny? But then, I was looking at the pictures of the platypus on Google. And I was like, well, that is kind of cute. And then my family loves the Hump Day commercials. What day is it? Hump Day, whoop, whoop, right? so I was like, yeah, okay, that's funny. But we do. I mean, like the things that keep a sense of levity and a sense of humor. What are some things that make y'all laugh? Like maybe the platypus doesn't do it for you, but are there some things in creation that you're like, what was God thinking? Do y'all have that? You're willing to share what you think is funny? All right, maybe another time. You can tell me later. But I love that these are some kind of, even though there's some elements of this that do resonate with our typical and traditional spiritual practices, these are accessible no matter what your faith tradition is, no matter what your association is. If you want to build up that which you believe in, how do you support it? And here's some accessible practices that anyone can do. And so he says, for the rung of faith, there's work to be done every day. Whether you're a spiritual medic or a spiritual construction worker, the work of restoration, reconciliation, and renewal on the run in the face of rapid changes is ongoing, and we're always serving others. He mentioned the International Women's Gathering in Brazil that he attended, and he asked the crowd, he asked them who believes that they or we can overcome the darkness, and asked them to stand. And he said, one by one, everyone stood. And I can imagine that. I'm like, can you imagine being there in a room full of women? I imagine an international women's meeting, women from all over the world, and knowing that there's places in the world where women are so oppressed and so subverted in the hierarchical structures, and asking them. I mean, obviously they're there; they have some access to power, but do you believe that you can make a difference in the world? And imagine being that first woman to stand up. Imagine what she had to experience in her life to have the courage and the strength and determination, the audacity to stand up. And then how this thing happens, right? Like somebody raises their hand and is like, well, okay, she didn't die. I can stand too, right? And so one by one, everybody starts standing until the whole room's standing. It's like when the choir is singing, there's that beautiful solo, and then the others join in until the whole congregation is singing, and your heart is just oh, goes to the heavens, right? Because all of a sudden we're not alone, and we can experience that tangible experience of what it means to be in community together. I love that stuff. Yeah, I do. So he shares some other meditations that I thought were noteworthy for me, but are there questions or comments or other things that you want to note or ask about?
Can you explain more about the spiritual medic, the concept of spiritual medic or construction worker?
Yeah, let me. The spiritual medic comes along. It's a title of one of the meditations, But he says, in the spiritual life, this is on page 28 if you do have your book, in the spiritual life, we all have a job description to fulfill. So in 2 messages I've received, so these are from his spiritual prayers, the image of a spiritual medic or a spiritual construction worker. Different images, but carry similar messages that we are here for a reason. Our lives are entrusted to a purpose. It is not always an easy or glamorous job, but it is the vital work of the restoration, reconciliation, and renewal that must be done, and done on the run in the face of rapid changes. So the spiritual medics, he talks about, he says, first, let me just read the spiritual medics. He says, I think you and I have been recruited as spiritual medics. We may not have asked for the job, but under the current circumstances, we have been pressed into service. It's a tough world out there. Socially, economically, and politically, people are struggling around us. People are anxious, angry, and afraid. They are divided and uncertain. Conflicts are increasing. Into this reality, the spiritual medic is called upon again and again to risk being a target in order to bring a healing word, to risk the safety of familiar trenches to stand on open ground for the sake of peace. We won't win any medals, but a lot of people are going to be glad we were there when they needed a little help believing in tomorrow. So a spiritual medic, kind of like a spiritual, a spiritual crisis worker. And then for the construction worker, the title is Sweat Equity. I guess you could say I have a working class spirituality. I think you have to put a little sweat equity into what you believe. You have to practice what you preach. Justice does not just happen. Compassion is not a spectator sport, but something I have to exercise as I roll up my sleeves to do my part in creating a better community. I need to put in my hours as a volunteer. I have to join the prayer crew and put my life on the line to make a difference. The world will not change. The world will change not by wishes, but by the labor of love we call faith. Spirituality is not a spa, but a construction site where we build hope one heart at a time. So the spiritual construction workers are the worker bees that get into the nitty-gritty and do the work. Thank you for asking. The Ocean of Listening meditation is basically about how people are listening and about how people are actually hungry for a word of hope, hungry for the good news. And the love as strength. He says, let love be your strength. You do not need anger or judgment, for they are mirrors of the soul that say more about you than others. You do not need righteousness or correctness, for these pretenses are always transparent. You do not need superiority or power, for they will always betray you to false pride. When you feel called to stand for what you believe, take up love as your witness. Love will shine through with the clear message you wish to convey. It will withstand any pressure to compromise your truth or bend to deny that truth. Love will unite your friends in struggle and speak to the hardest heart with whom you contend. Let love be your strength, and you can stand before lions and never fear. And that's hard when push comes to shove, right? If we know, if we've been confronted with others and been, like, I love my neighbor, but not feeling it right now, right? Let love be your strength. I think that's where we kind of like lean into silence more than anything, right? Okay, we're running out of time. So chapter 2, the rung of blessing. No one can give you what you already have, which is the love of the Spirit within you. Like I said earlier, you like the presence of Christ within you, the presence of Christ that dwells, the love of God that dwells in us is our greatest blessing. And so that can't be given to you by anything or anyone other than God. And he really thinks that like this is the card that he has up his sleeve, is believing in the Spirit. Hashtali is the vastness beyond the sun. It's I forget which. I don't think he said which tradition that comes from or what word that comes from, but that's one word that used to describe spirit. And he defined spirit as the vast consciousness present in creation at all times and in all places, and equally present in our lives, helping each of us to do the things that would otherwise be impossible, which should resonate scripturally for all of us. But I love really the idea that he has, that point of our transformation, like really that when things click into place, is when we turn toward the light. At that point of transformation, when we choose to turn towards the light, is when the Spirit touches us and when we are changed by that intimacy. I think I'm trying to think of like a way to describe it, but that's the way that God and our experience of Spirit is. It's really ineffable. There aren't words to describe it. But other than like epiphany or like those aha moments or just that sudden realization that like that peace of Christ is actually here and now. And in those moments, they're very personal and very, overwhelming and very beautiful and quiet generally. And that's kind of how we describe the holy, right? And he says that that we are really masterpieces of endless possibility, no matter what we've been conditioned to believe. So you hear him saying, like, he's tapped into our own, like, our tape that we might have for ourselves, kind of Brene Brown telling, like reminding us that, like, we tell ourselves we're not good enough. And then we have, like, whatever our family situation or our work or society telling us that we're, we can't affect change. But it's actually that with you, all things are possible in union with God. And also that Spirit has intimacy we often don't or won't claim between us. And because, I don't know, if I just talk to everybody about my intimate experiences with the Spirit and how my bliss is union with God, I mean, they're like, so what do you do? Like, what's your day job? Like, how does this pay the bills? Like, what's your relevance? Because we think about like what our social norms are and what we value in society. We don't value talking about our spiritual experiences. When we think about Northwest Arkansas as a hub for, like quality of life, how often do you see like spiritual quality of life on those lists of things that are important? You don't, because it's not generally valued, because you're not going to make money or generate revenue or profit by giving people these non-monetized spiritual experiences. And, I mean, if you know how to do that, let us know. We would love to start that at St. Paul's, right? But those value and self-worth we have to mention them a lot in this present time, because that's what helps give us confidence, not only in our faith and what we believe, but that self-confidence that we can actually believe we can make a difference, or that we can keep climbing the ladder, right? So again, the kiva is native. Many Native Americans in the Southwest use it. He talks about the blessing way from the Dene, the Navajo nation, and both of these things provide a path towards light, their spiritual transformation and being touched by the Spirit. And he says that the blessing is to trust what your heart tells you. You are loved unconditionally, you are cared for unceasingly, and you are secure in arms that will never let you go. Can you imagine, like, if every child had that as like their bedtime prayer and assurance from their parents or guardians that you're loved unconditionally, cared for unceasingly, and you are secure in arms that will never let you go? And then they actually had life experiences that assured that for them, that showed them a way that was possible. I'm so thankful for a family and grandmothers and extended family that kind of showed me that love through all the things that happened in our lives. That love was just kind of a given for us. And I always had loving arms to return to. But also, blessing is the conduit or the channel through which the Spirit's sacred energy enters into our lives. We are literally touched by the Spirit. We are healed, strengthened, and empowered, and this is good medicine that is best shared. How many of you go to the Wednesday healing noon service? The Wednesday noon service is our healing Eucharist. And so, yes, we have a healing service at St. Paul's on Wednesdays at noon. And they meet in the chancel, and there's generally about a dozen of us there. And it's in the book of occasional services, there's the option, a service for healing, and then we have the option for anointing. And so we use oil that we have blessed, and we invite people to come up to the altar rail if they would like a prayer for healing. And so it's kind of like when you come up for communion and we receive the bread and the wine, which he says Holy Communion is our place of intimacy with, or being one with the Spirit, when we receive the bread and wine. So it's coming forward and receiving a blessing, a laying on of hands. And whatever your prayer concern, if you give voice to it, we pray for that, and we invite the presence of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to be with you. And that's just like the physical touch is just that, little sacramental reminder of the grace and the presence of God. That divine power and that human longing gives us that opportunity to be transformed by love. And so maybe we can leave a little bit stronger than when we came in. That's a powerful moment. If you've never experienced that, I invite you to. Anytime. You don't have to be going through crisis. And you might be praying actually for someone else. But it's a very tender, intimate service. And then I appreciate that he gives a note that those traumatized by forced intimacy or old wounds, for them to know that the Spirit stands by waiting for when they are ready to seek healing. And that's not something that we can just force somebody. Well, you've experienced this horrible thing, now come now and to come to our healing service so you can be healed of that mess. That's not how that works, right? Don't mean to make light of it, but my gosh, some people do it wrong, right? We know the right way. No, there's a lot that we can learn from being trauma-informed, and I appreciated him giving note to that. So that's all we have for today, and I've got like 4 minutes to get to the sacristy, but any thoughts or comments or questions, or you feel like this is a good tempo? Because if it's not like adequate, somehow we're going to get through like 4 chapters next week, but we can do it. All right. Any thoughts or comments? Everybody good? All right, we'll keep reading. Let's go.